Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to Core Mentor. My name's Daniel and today we're going to talk about addiction. And in this video I wanted to do an overview of addiction. I wanted to speak from my experience, and then also there's this new method that I've been using that's really helped me tremendously and making such great progress on dealing with my various addictions. And before we begin, if that sounds great, go ahead and subscribe because I'll be making a lot more videos getting into this topic because one video is definitely not enough. And all right, let's go. We'll have a casual conversation exploring this topic. And really quick before we start, I'm not an expert. This comes from experience, and it also comes through the success that I've been able to enjoy over the last several years using this new method. And what it's done for me, really put a fire underneath my seat to get out and talk about it. I didn't really want to talk about it at first because addiction is kind of a shameful topic. Whenever you discuss this with people, it's not really seen very in a good light. But addiction is on a spectrum, and normally whenever the negativity around addiction is because of the damage it does on the extreme level. Like whenever you get into someone who's really hardcore addicted to drugs, hardcore addicted to alcohol, pornography, and so on and so forth. The damage that it causes and the person's inability to stop is what develops such a negative connotation behind it. But the reality is that a lot of people deal with addictions, and it's on a spectrum, and there's like lower level addictions, like more acceptable kinds of addictions. If you think about being addicted to coffee, no one really thinks much of that. If you think about being addicted to work, no one really thinks much about that, except for maybe the spouse, the husband or wife at home who is not getting that time with that person, but they're a really productive member of society, even though they are addicted. It's the more extreme examples that carry a lot of the negativity. But in general, if there is an addiction, it's a problem. And it's going to slowly hurt the person. It's going to slowly take away from the person. And it's a really good concept to get more understanding about, to really realize what's going on there. And before we dive into that, just generally, what is an addiction? So let's set a standard for this conversation. Like, what are we going to consider addiction? And addiction is a behavior, a repeated behavior that is basically unstoppable. That's what it gets down to. The person cannot stop doing the behavior. And I think almost anything, like the saying says, anything in excess is bad. And so almost anything we can become addicted to. We'll focus on the common ones, but that's really what it gets down to. And when the behaviors start, normally there isn't this really big problem, and it forms over years. So addictions are also very entrenched. And people start dealing with them when they start to cause problems. That's another issue with addictions, and why addictions are such a big deal and seen so negatively, because they've had years or decades to really get entrenched into the mind, get entrenched into the belief system, and reinforce themselves. But there is definitely a way to deal with it. And getting into the thumbnail using coffee, I wanted to use that because I think I, to a degree, have a low-level addiction to coffee, and it's a little bit easier to talk about without triggering people. I don't know, some people might get mad, I'm not addicted to coffee. But when you sit down and think about it, maybe you are. And it's not the end of the world if you are, but it's something that you want to be aware of and you can work on. So what I've discovered is that in my own life, whenever I have an addiction, it's usually tied to some belief within myself. And I believe that applies to everybody that has an addiction, because you look at them doing this repeated behavior and it can be extremely destructive, and they keep doing it. There's some kind of positive belief that if I do this behavior, it's going to be good for me. I'm going to get rewarded. And a lot of them have dopamine tied into it. So there could be a little bit of the reward right there, is that if I drink coffee in the morning, one absolute fact is I'm going to get some dopamine. I'm going to be feeling good. So that's fantastic. That's great. Let's do it again. And you can get to the point where you're just trying to feel good more and more and more from that source. But the belief is in the realm of what I would call core toxic beliefs. For me, maybe it's possible a much smaller percentage of the population, maybe it's possible just to get addicted to something because of what it is, because it just releases so much dopamine or something like that. But what I've personally experienced and what I've seen in a lot of people is that there is a negative toxic belief with why I'm going to do this. And that belief usually goes around something like I'm not acceptable, or I'm not productive enough, or maybe there's something bad in my life that hurts me that I don't want to deal with. And so I'm going to keep doing this behavior so I can distract from it. Because that's one thing too, whenever I think about my own addictions, is usually you want to get it into your life to a place to where you're not really thinking about it, where it's just kind of natural and just keeps carrying you forward, and you don't think about what it's covering up or that negative belief behind it that's driving it forward. So well, back to coffee. I've been thinking about coffee a lot lately, and it's not at the top of my list of things to take care of. So it's something that I'm okay with. I have lowered my coffee intake, but it's likely an addiction to caffeine. Getting that energy, getting that rush, getting that dopamine, feeling strong. There's a lot of positive benefits you get after you drink a coffee. I like coffee, but I bet Red Bull or anything else would do it for me as well. And when I dug a little deeper and I sat down and I thought about it, I started to realize there actually are some negative beliefs behind why I drink coffee every day and why I don't want to stop, or it would be really difficult to stop cold turkey. And one of those beliefs is productivity. It's worked its way into my mind that I can't be as productive at work or in my personal life unless I have some caffeine. And there may be a little bit of a dependency there. I've used it so much, now I kind of need it to be productive. And I've actually pulled back on my coffee intake, and that I kind of found that I was a little bit less productive. I was a little more tired. It's more work to be productive. Not impossible, but it was more work, and it wasn't as easy. And digging in even a little more deeper to it, I found when I wasn't using coffee that it became easier to feel down about life. It became easier to have feelings of sadness or depression. And so there's like an energy high that coffee was giving me that was taking me away from some real life problems. And so I'm working on that. I would agree with that. I think there are certain areas of my life that I don't have peace with. And it was partially through not having coffee that I started to see that bubble up. And it interfered with just my thought process throughout the day. But when you have coffee, you're like, boom, you're focused, you're ready to go, you're just zeroed in, very few distractions. So interesting, right? But I found those two things. There was a productivity thing. I'm not going to be as productive as I want to be. And then there's, well, maybe I have some emotional baggage to take care of. And so that addiction lives on. And I have like 1 or 2 cups of coffee a day. I'm not like hammering caffeine. I used to. I mean, there's some days I remember having 4 or 5 venti Starbucks coffees, which is a ton of caffeine, probably close to 1,000 milligrams. Now I'm just a few hundred. And so that's something I've been working on, and I like that I'm dealing with it. I like that I'm aware of it. But before I had this core toxic belief that I could tie to, if it was stop drinking coffee, it was like, just stop because you need to. There wasn't a lot of oomph behind my will to stop, if that makes sense, because I didn't understand it. I didn't understand why I was going to caffeine. I didn't understand what was driving that. So my need to be productive, and then my need to not feel sad all the time. It doesn't feel good to feel sad all the time. So then, okay, now we understand that. So I can work on those, and then my desire for coffee's gone down. And I realized, well, maybe I don't need coffee all the time to be productive. Maybe I can find this natural energy somewhere else. And usually it gets into, well, now you have to start sleeping. You have to eat well. You have to take care of yourself. It's so funny to say, but that's it. Now I sleep like 8-9 hours a night. I have to go to bed early. I can't stay up all night looking on my phone, but I'm starting to get this natural energy. I'm starting to feel better. I'm starting to feel like I can do it, and I don't need coffee as much. And with any addiction. If you're struggling hard with drugs, if you're struggling hard with alcohol, if you're a workaholic, if you're struggling with porn, if you're struggling with materialism, all of these things, I think you'll find a similar process in there. I think you'll find that there is some belief you have that's not really doing you any favors, and that belief is driving your addiction. And so you keep repeating your behavior, so you get that reward, whatever it is, distraction, dopamine, feeling of success, feeling of acceptance, whatever. And so you just keep going. And you can do that for a very long time until it starts breaking you down, until your relationships start to break down or your body starts to break down. Then you're forced to stop and go, what? And then even at that point, some people don't stop. They just keep going until they can't go anymore. And what I would encourage everybody, and what I'm trying to do myself, is get some self-awareness. Start being honest with yourself. It's not this heavy, judgmental, you're a terrible person, you have an addiction type treatment anymore, because it's understandable. You have a toxic belief. This toxic belief was planted somehow, some way. And what I found with a lot of my toxic beliefs is they were early on adopted toxic beliefs that have kind of matured over the years that I had no idea about. And then they started driving these addictions. And then you get older and you get more freedom and you can do a lot more stuff. And then they start to latch on to things. And latch on to addictions. And it's just something to be aware of. And what I've personally experienced is when I have done that, when I've kind of, what I would say the truth, honestly, what I think is the truth. I think when you get an addiction, it's not just some disease or some mysterious thing or even a demon or a spiritual battle, though maybe, that's open to discussion. I would say maybe with a lot of things, with a disease or a spiritual battle or needing medicine or having a chemical imbalance or something, maybe, because I think there's a lot more to your belief system, because I think your belief system is almost like a computer program, and whenever your belief system isn't healthy, it drives you to do weird things, as you've seen your computer do weird things. Whenever you have a phone or a computer or something electronic, it's just really acting strange. If it gets a weird program, it will do that. Think of a virus, what it does to your computer, the blue screen of death. It drives you nuts, but it's just a program. And getting into that program, getting into that belief will begin changing the output. And that has really got me passionate, because from my own personal struggles, it's been mysterious. It hasn't been defined. It hasn't been solid how to deal with it. But then I started getting into the belief-based method. And wow, things aren't as hard as they used to be. Things make sense. I'm having more control. I'm having more power in these missions to control my addictions. Like, I'm dealing with low-level addictions like screen scrolling and coffee, and I'm making progress. I'm making progress pretty quickly. And, it's really exciting to see where everything goes. And I will get into other topics too, and some stronger, more destructive addictions that I've dealt with. I didn't want to do it all in the video. But to kind of get to the end and to sum it all up, what was breakthrough for me was getting into the complex trauma discussion, understanding how when you go through a complex trauma, basically when you're exposed to being treated unhealthfully in some way, and it can be a huge way that you're treated or even a small way in just some little side part of your life, how that can form and develop, and that's where these core toxic beliefs come from. And one name that I'll throw out, just to name drop, in just if you want to learn a lot and get a crash course in knowledge on trauma, Gabor Mate was fantastic for me. That's where I really started getting into it. There may be, with like science and learning, I feel like we only know what we know until we move further on down the road. Because that's how it felt like with addiction for me and my struggles. I'm in my 30s, so when I started struggling with addiction, the resources were not that great. They kind of helped, but they didn't solve the problem. I didn't feel like any of the resources really solved the problem. And getting into trauma in that realm of knowledge, I feel like that begins to solve the problem. So we've moved further down the road. Because with that application in my own life, it's like, wow, things have changed. But it's a very complex topic, and I'm trying to cram a lot into a short video, but I need to start wrapping it up. But to close, and what I would leave you with is, let's start talking about addiction. Let's start getting some self-awareness and keep an open mind with it. Because there are new schools of thought. There are new methods that connect with the old and that can create much more success. I am the most positive I've been in decades plus, probably a decade or two plus, in dealing with some of my addictions. I think some of my addictions I've been dealing with for two and a half decades. And this is the best I've ever felt about it, because I feel like there's something I can finally do about it. And that's what I would share with you. That's why I'm making this video, because there's something that you can actually do about it. That where you can, I believe that you can solve your addiction. I believe that you can heal from your addiction and not live with it. Always be cautious of it, but where you can be free. And that's why I'm going to make these series of videos. That's why I'm going to throw it out there and see what sticks, is because ultimately at the end of the day, I'm experiencing a level of freedom, and it's from a source that I didn't think it would be from, and I want to share that. And there's other people that are sharing it. I'm not the only one sharing it. And if you're struggling, I think you can be free too. So hang in there, ask questions, keep working, keep moving forward, and you're going to do just fine. All right? I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.